here's what I have. I just want to, it sounds an awful lot like what you're saying, so I just want to make sure that we're clear on it. Premise one, we should not harm people unnecessarily. Would that be correct? We should not harm people unnecessarily?
No, I actually made another one.
What is your argument here? Let's make sure I got it right in premise form.
So premise one, we don't want our sons and daughters to suffer.
We don't want, hang on, let me write it out here. We don't want our sons and daughters to suffer, because that would be unnecessary, right?
Premise two. Yeah. Suffering is inevitable once our sons and daughters start to exist.
So would you say suffering is inevitable?
Yes.
Okay, suffering is inevitable.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so that's premise two. So premise one, we don't want our sons and daughters to suffer. And premise two, suffering is inevitable, right?
Suffering is inevitable once our sons and daughters start to exist.
Okay, once they exist. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So conclusion, we should not reproduce them to begin with.
So your argument is we don't want our sons and daughters to suffer. Suffering is inevitable once they exist. So as long as people don't care if their sons or daughters suffer, what I don't understand, how do you prove the argument when a person says that?
Let's go this premise by premise. Do you agree that we don't want our sons and daughters to suffer?
No.
You don't agree about that?
No.
Why?
Because it's silly. If my son wanted to climb Mount Everest, he's going to suffer. And I would support him.
No, it doesn't follow.
Yes, it does. It does follow.
He is already in existence.
So
my argument is based on a state of non-existence to a state of existence. There's a difference.
Yeah, but I assume that the future existence of my sons and daughters will include suffering. Therefore, I don't. Therefore, I do not conclude that I don't want my sons and daughters to suffer. That is so built into your premise is we all want our sons and daughters to not suffer. The reason this is a faulty premise is because it presupposes something which isn't true. I actually presuppose that my sons and daughters are going to suffer, and I do want them to. That's how people grow.
But you do realize that I'm talking about people who do not exist, children that are not in existence.
Yeah, we're both talking about potentials. That's correct. But you're instantly talking about a potential saying we all want this thing, right? So this is universal. You're making a universalized claim. And the problem with this universalized claim is that it's easily falsified because no, we don't all want that. So the conclusion, it's an unsound argument. The conclusion doesn't follow even, or the, I'm sorry, it's not unsound, it's invalid because the premises themselves are not valid.
All right. Would you choose a world in which your son would reach a particular pleasure without pain, without going through pain?
Well, pain is different than suffering.
How so?
Because you can suffer with no pain, with no physical pain.
There's mental pain, psychological pain.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there can be, but I think that those pains are healthy. So the answer is no. I think, for instance,
I agree.
I think that those pains are healthy. So no, I don't know what you're talking about.
This is instrumental pain. Once you're already in existence, you have this instrumental pain. You go to the gym, tire yourself, you fast, you take cold showers, you don't sleep at night. This is instrumental pain towards a greater pleasure.
Yeah, but you don't have any way. You have no way to make measurements like this. This is just made up tripe. You can't measure any of this. You can't quantify any of this. Hang on. There's no way for you to quantify any of this. That's the first problem that you have. The second is you presuppose inside of your syllogism, we all want something, but you can't demonstrate that. It's just a supposition that you made up. No, in fact, we don't all want that. So because it is not in fact true that we all want that, the argument is invalid, sir. It's invalid. It starts with a supposition which is invalid.
It would be invalid if you do not first premise.
I don't accept the first premise because it's not, it's an invalid premise.
So you want your daughter and son to suffer?
Yes, I do. Yes.
All right. Well, okay, then this is why you bring them to existence. So
yes,
that's it.
That's it. How is that an argument? That's not making, listen, do you realize that the entire refutation to your worldview is that all I have to do to refute the entirety of your argument and show that it's invalid is say, yes, I think that there's some forms of suffering which are appropriate for my sons and daughters and want them to go through that. Because that's where I think, hang on, stop, let me make the argument. Because that's where ultimate achievement comes from. So if you agree that my son's going to suffer climbing Mount Everest in the future potentially, right, and I want him to go through that suffering, then you have invalidated your argument because you started with a we all universal claim. You can't demonstrate the universal claim because it's a presupposition.
And this argument is made on antinatalist ground with the knowledge of, we are talking about people that are not yet in existence. Of course, you could have an instrumental pain. I share with you the same thing. I would want my son to go through suffering. I would want.
Then what the f are you talking about? Then it's invalid. When you say we all, premise one, right? We don't want our sons and daughters to suffer. Now you're in a contradiction because you just said that you do want your sons and daughters to suffer. That's P and not P, dude.
No, not in this paradigm. Not in the antinatalist paradigm.
Yes, even in the antinatalist paradigm, you can't have P and not P unless you're using some form of logic that I'm unaware of. Are you okay? Hang on, stop. A logical contradiction is what? P and not P, correct? Is that correct? Is that what a logical contradiction is, or is it not what a logical contradiction is from the antinatalist worldview? From the antinatalist worldview, is a contradiction P and not P? Okay, great. Then if you say we don't, want our sons and daughters to suffer, and then you go on to say that you do want your sons and daughters to suffer, that's a contradiction. That's P and not P, dude.
If they are already in existence, yes, I would want them not to suffer. I want them to suffer instrumentally, not just suffer.
Dude, based on the potentiality baked into the worldview is your assumption that all people are going to suffer. That's why you don't want them to come into existence. So what you're doing is you're presupposing that these future potential people are going to suffer. And then when they get here, you want them to suffer, meaning that you're negating your own worldview. You're negating your own worldview.
That's the problem. When they are already here, the only way for them to grow is to suffer. So I don't want them to suffer to begin with. So
okay, so then you're in. So then your argument's invalid. We don't want our sons and daughters to suffer is invalid because you do want your sons and daughters to suffer. These potential people will suffer in the future, according to your worldview.
This argument works in the antinatalist paradigm.
It doesn't work in the antinatalist paradigm. It's a contradiction. As long as logic works in your paradigm, that's a contradiction, dude.
There's a difference between a state of starting to exist, already in existence, and not beginning to exist. So you make this argument when you are already not having children, but when you have them already, it changes because the asymmetry doesn't apply anymore.
How does it not apply? We're both starting with the same supposition that your children are future potential people, right?
It doesn't apply anymore because there's a difference between a life worth starting and the life worth continuing.
Yeah, but we're still talking about we're both talking about potentials, right? So potentially, if your children are born, you will want them to suffer, right?
What? Repeat?
So potentially, if your children are born, you will want them to suffer?
When they're already in existence, yes.
Okay, sure, great. So then why is it preferable for them to not ever suffer, even if it's the case that it's your preference that they do?
I want them to instrumentally suffer if they are already in existence.
Yeah, but even if they're not in existence, why is it not better for them to be in existence and to suffer if it's the case that you want them to suffer if they exist?
All right. Why is it better for them? Because the absence of pain is good, but the absence of pleasure is neutral. Nobody's deprived of pleasure. They are not here to begin with. They cannot be deprived.
Then why don't you unalive yourself?
Okay, why don't I unalive myself?
Yeah.
Because there is a difference between a life worth continuing and the life worth starting. I'm already in existence. I already have.
Yeah, you don't have to, but you don't have to be in existence, right?
No, I have.
Then why don't you the existence of yourself? And then you experience no potential pain, right? So think of it this way. Let's take two potentials. Let's take two potentials. Potential one.
Will you allow me to speak? Will you allow me to speak? I already have an interest.
Go ahead.
There's a difference between starting to exist and not beginning to exist at all. When I'm already in existence, I have this interest in staying alive. But
why?
I cannot
why? Yeah, but why?
Biology. It's a biology.
It's a biology thing. So you're too scared to unalive yourself. That's what you're saying, right?
Everybody is. Everybody is.
No, everybody's not. That's why I say you antinatalists are such cowards, because soldiers are not, firefighters are not, police officers are not, risk-taking base jumpers are not. Almost everybody is willing to go the distance with their convictions, except you people.
This is not a good example, because police.
It is a good example.
All of those occupations that you just said, they're just taking risks.
Can you overcome fear? Can you overcome fear?
Come on, man. Let me speak.
I just want to know. I want to know the answer to the question. It's my turn. I'm interrogating this view right now. Is it the case? Can you overcome fear? Can you overcome
those
fear?
people, wait, question by question, those people that are already doing those risky jobs are just risking things. They're just risking. They don't know that they're gonna die immediately. But you're telling someone, oh, life is go and yourself directly. Those people are not themselves. They're just risking it. There's a difference.
No, those people, a lot of people do unalive themselves. What do you mean? Because because they don't want to experience pain. Hang on. Let me make the. Can I make the counter now? Can I make the counter? So let's start with this. Can fear be something which you can overcome? Can you overcome fear?
Depends on the intensity, but sure, yes. Why not?
Okay, great. Is it the case that this life is not worth living?
No.
It's not. So then why should I assume that potential future people are going to have a life that they don't want either?
It's worth continuing because I'm already in existence. It's not worth starting. This is the difference that you do not understand.
Yeah, but you're not explaining why it's not worth starting. Why is it not worth starting?
Because of the asymmetry.
Huh?
The absence, because of the asymmetry. Do you know about the asymmetry? The asymmetry argument?
Go ahead.
But anyway, the asymmetry argument says the absence of pain is good. A life which is absent of pain is good. This is
that's great. Yeah, that's great. But this is what I keep asking you to demonstrate. When you say it's good, you're just saying it's preferential to you.
I haven't said the asymmetry. I haven't stated correctly. The absence of pain is good.
Okay.
The absence of pain is good, but the absence of pleasure is neutral. Okay. Nobody regrets that his child doesn't come to existence because he wouldn't experience such great things. But people really regret when they have a child and he suffers tremendously. There's an asymmetry. Nobody regrets this.
Okay,
so
no suffering, good, right? And then what did you say the neutral position was?
So absence of suffering is good.
Okay.
And absence of and absence of pleasure is neutral.
Okay, great. Can you demonstrate that absence of pleasure is neutral? Or is that just a preference?
No. This is, of course, still in the antinatalist paradigm. Nobody regrets that his child. So, for example, you, Andrew.
Now, can you answer my question before you ask me one?
Yes,
what makes it neutral other than a preference?
I am answering it.
Okay, then answer it.
For example, me, not to make an example of you. For example, me, I never regret not bringing my son to existence to experience all of these great things in the world. It's a neutral position. We don't really care about that.
That's that tautology. That's a tautology. You're just restating it's neutral because it's neutral. What makes it a neutral thing? What?
How is it a tautology?
Because you're just saying it's neutral because it's neutral. You say because the world that I live in, I consider these things neutral, therefore they're neutral. What makes them neutral, though? Is it just your preference?
They makes them neutral because nobody cares that people.
What do you mean? Yes, people care. What are you talking about? You don't care, but other people care. What do you?
If people care that their children are not coming to existence to experience pleasure, they will never stop reproducing. Because they will always care that their children are not coming to existence, as if they are in a realm of existence, not experiencing pleasure, and they're having a tremendous amount of pain, not experiencing those.
That doesn't explain how pleasure itself is neutral. That doesn't explain that. That's just you. You're just Listen, you're just giving me a word salad. You need to actually descriptively tell me how pleasure is neutral, but pain is a bad. How? Are you just saying that these are based around your preferential worldview? Is it just based around your preferential worldview? Do you have actual philosophical evidence to support this?
It's not pleasure in itself, but rather the absence of pleasure. Let me tell you something. I'll just state what I said without the word self because you failed to understand what I'm talking about.
Okay.
If people say, well, the absence of pleasure is not neutral, and they actually care about the absence of pleasure, they will never stop reproducing because they will always presume that their non-existent children are suffering in a realm.
These are assertions, not demonstrations.
This is how philosophical argumentation works.
No, this is not how argumentation works. You demonstrate arguments within logic. What you're going to do, first of all, you have to make a valid argument. You haven't done that. You've made a contradictory argument. The second problem that you have, yes, you said we all, and then instantly said you are the exception to the we all. That's a contradiction. That's the first problem. The second problem that you have here is, no, you do within your logical framework At least if you believe in the laws of logic and you're using classical logic or modern logic, you're going to have to make an argument. And the argument, what I'm asking you is to make an argument absent preference. This is not preferential. Rather, there's something that backs this up other than your own preference. Do you have anything that does that or not?
Do you care that nobody is in Mars experiencing pleasure?
What?
Do you care that nobody in Mars experiencing pleasure?
It doesn't matter what I care about. It's irrelevant.
It doesn't matter. It's neutral. Thank you.
Yeah, no, yeah, I don't understand like what you're even talking about. Whatever I say here is irrelevant. It's not what Andrew Wilson personally cares about. It's the argument that you're making, which is a universal. When you say nobody, that means all peoples, correct? Otherwise, it would not be nobody. Yeah. Okay, great. So then you need to demonstrate for all peoples, not for one person. Yes, I don't care. Andrew Wilson doesn't care. People on Mars aren't experiencing pleasure because there's no people on Mars. But you can't demonstrate that that's the case for everybody. You can't demonstrate that.
Well, I think any person with a reasonable mind.
That's not an argument either. That's an argument ad populum. It's a fallacy. It's a fallacious argument. You're saying, I believe that most people would agree with me. That's a fallacious argument.
I think that this is self-evident. Nobody.
Oh, now it's axiomatic. So now it's axiomatic. It's a self-evident axiom. What?
I made an example.
No, you said that this is self-evident. Now you're saying that this is axiomatic. If it's self-evident, yeah. So you're saying it's an axiom now.
Oh no. Can I speak because I haven't finished?
Go ahead.
Some people regret having children when they start to suffer. Like, for example, when they see them suffering from a disability.
You mean some people? You know, why don't you caveat it with some people?
Can I finish a sentence, please?
Well, I mean, I wish that you'd make arguments that are coherent, but go ahead.
People regret when they have children, especially if they are suffering, right? But no people at all ever regret children not experiencing pleasure because those children are not there to begin with.
Okay. Are those universal? Are you making universal claims? When you say nobody regrets this, that's a universal claim, right?
Well, yes, but
okay, great. So hang on, stop. So then if even one person has that regret, your argument is now invalid, correct?
Even if he does that, it's simply stupid.
Hang on, let's start with this. What is a universal? Is a universal something which is true of all people at all time when you're making it about people?
All right.
Yeah, so then that can't be a universal claim, right? You're not, I mean, that's impossible for you to demonstrate that universal.
Like for all people?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. It would be impossible for all.
Then why are you making universal claims, dude?
All right, let me tell you why. Because even in the case that somebody says, well, I actually regret my child that he didn't come to existence to experience all of these pleasures. This doesn't make any sense because the potential child is not depraved.
I'm sorry, say that again. Say that again.
Even if we find one person, which is very irrational position to take, that says, well, I'm very rich and I wish my son was here to inherit all of those material goods. Yeah. This doesn't make any sense because his son is not depraved of anything.
That I don't even know that's an incoherent argument. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're making, because you're still, because if you make a universal claim, you need to demonstrate the universal. You need to demonstrate it. You're not demonstrating this universal while you're making the claim. It makes it invalid. Hang on, stop, man. I reject the premise based on the fact that you're making a universal, right? But you're not demonstrating the universal. You're just assuming it. You just assume the universal.
I have granted to you that I cannot demonstrate at all. Of course, nobody can, of course. It's just rhetoric. You can say that it's just.
Then there's no way for you to get to the conclusion here. It's an unsound argument because it starts with invalid premises.
Just let me say, because I think you haven't heard the last thing I said.
Okay, go ahead.
Even if we could find one person that says, well, I really regret not having any kids to experience lots of pleasures. this wouldn't be this wouldn't make any sense because that child doesn't exist and cannot be retrieved.
Yeah, but that would prove that the universal claim that you're making is invalid, though. You see how that works? So as long as you can, as long as you can envision that there's going to be at least some people who have those regrets, you're universal.
You want your daughter and son to suffer?
Yes.
Okay, but that suffering wouldn't be the case if they didn't exist to begin with.
How do you know?
What do you mean? How do you know? They are not in existence.
Well, you're presupposing. Hang on. You're presupposing that, aren't you?
I'm presupposing because existence cannot precede existence.
How do you know?
It cannot.
How do you know?
How can you exist before? How can you exist before you exist?
You mean that's a contradiction?
Exist before you exist. I don't know if it.
Yeah, it's not a contradiction, is it? You could exist before you exist, couldn't you?
All right, demonstrate how.
But anyway, the point is like, if you want to dive into this road, you can, but we're both assuming that these are potential people. We can't assume potentiality in people if they're not going to exist, because then there's no potential for them to exist. So when you ask a potentiality, the potential question is, does this person exist? Right? Is this person going to come into existence? Do you want your sons and daughters? I don't know. How could they be my sons and daughters if they don't exist?
There's a potential, as you said. Yes.
When you say my sons and daughters, if they don't exist, they're not my sons and daughters, right?
Yeah, yes. All right.
So then it's not a valid premise. It's just not a valid premise. I don't know what to tell you.
We conclude this from experience. I experienced that. Like, for example, I could do this with a third child. Like, for example, I have my first child and I have my second child. And I see that my first children have suffered quite a lot. I can make this argument for my third child and it would work.
You make what? No, you can't make this argument for your third child because it presumes that you're going to have a third child, right?
No, I already had two children. And
yes.
I assumed that the same would happen to my third child. So I do not need my child to see it in front of me. I can simply have its potential in my mind in order to make this argument.
Yes, but your premise states specifically, we do not want our sons and daughters to suffer. That's premise one, right? In order for me to engage with this logically, I have to know what a son and daughter is. Now, here's what I would say a son is. A son would be a human male, which was birthed from a woman who I impregnated. That would be a son. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
What a son is not is something which does not exist, would not be a son. So therefore, if it's the case, we're already assuming these people are in existence based on your own syllogism.
This works on experience. I have told you that I could have.
It can't work. No, it doesn't work. Because then why don't you say potential sons and daughters? Maybe that would help fix. It's not self-evident.
It is.
It's not.
Because aren't we debating antinatalism?
Yes.
Well, self-evident then. Everybody knows.
It's not self-evident. No, you don't put, oh, dude, come on. It's not axiomatic inside your premise.
Oh, man.
It's ridiculous.
Everybody knows that we are talking about potential children in antinatalism.
Yeah. Okay, well, then let's engage with this directly then. Do you agree with me that the ultimate end of your logical argumentation is that there's no more human beings or biological life at all which can suffer or has the potential to suffer?
Human beings.
Yeah, yes. But I mean animals too. There's no reason to have them suffer.
Logically, if everybody stops, I don't really care, but if everybody becomes an antinatalist, it would logically follow that humans would cease to exist. Yes.
Yeah, humans cease to exist. Then what about the maxim? What about the maxim that I gave you? That the best way to assure that human beings no longer exist is to have as many of them as resources will allow, which makes more brains. The more brains will create better technologies from which to all peoples. Wouldn't that actually be the correct antinatalist stance for you to have a pro-natalist stance, which moves towards more reproduction for the most amount of people, knowing that that's the best causal chain that will actually cause the elimination of humanity?
No.
Yes. Okay, can you tell me how it's not? What? Go ahead.
What you're doing is
what?
My argument, all right. My argument only works with my proper individual. this antinatalism, it doesn't have an agenda towards a global extinction. All right? I see that my son would suffer, I stop him from suffering. That's it. I
Yeah, but
don't
I'm
care
giving
about
you,
what would happen.
but hang on.
I don't
You want
all right.
everybody to not have children, right?
No, I don't care.
Then how's that antinatalism? It's just you know what I mean, it's just your personal preference.
I think I think everything is pretty much a personal preference. It's
Well,
not
hang
the
on,
case.
hang on. Let me just make sure I got this right, because this might just end the debate. We might actually have agreement here. Is it just
No,
your position from the position of antinatalism that you yourself should not reproduce?
yes.
Okay, well then we're in complete agreement.
The problem is,
there's no problem.
whenever I
We're in complete agreement. You should not reproduce. I agree.
well, all right. I think you should not reproduce either.
I thought you just got done saying you don't care. It's another contradiction.
Yes, I don't care. Well,
Now you care. So you're a contradiction machine, bro.
No,
10
I
seconds
don't
ago,
care.
you said I don't care if other people don't reproduce. Now you're saying you do care that other people reproduce.
No, that's
And when you say you don't, you
Oh,
yourself, it's a personal preference for you to not reproduce. I say I agree with you, and that's still not good enough.
it
Holy,
the argument shows, and your cognitive dissonance shows that you shouldn't do it either. You do it, you don't do it. I don't really care.
why shouldn't I do it? I'm fine with you not reproducing.
Because you don't want your children to suffer. That's pretty
But
much it.
I have literally told you 100 times I do want my children to suffer, for sure.
Okay, all right. I agree with you. I agree with you. That's instrumental pain. If I make a
But help
child,
me
I
out here.
also
But help
want-
me out here. If it's the case that
Please,
the
please,
core,
please,
well, I'm just
please,
trying to make
one
sure I got
sec,
the
one sec,
position
one at a
right.
time.
I need to make sure the position is right. Your actual
Okay.
position is you do not care if other people reproduce. You only care if you reproduce, right?
I only care about things in my control. I don't care if they do it or not.
Okay, great. So if that's the case, you're saying it's your personal preference to not reproduce, and these are your reasons, right? Hang on. And these are your reasons for why you came to that preference. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, I have no problem with that. It doesn't conflict with any worldview of mine, and you shouldn't reproduce then. Absolutely. In fact, I think you're going to make the world a better place, bro. I think the world is going to 100% be a better place with you not reproducing based on your preference. That does nothing to undermine my preference, though.